Everything triggers off a sort of information need. And to meet your need, you've got to seek information, hence information seeking. Now, in the old days, it wasn't so easy to do that. You could talk to your mother, you could maybe go to the local library, and if you were lucky enough to live next door to the British Library, you were really lucky because they had lots and lots of information and lots of opportunities for information seeking.
In the 20th century, if you had something to say in public, you couldn't. Period. Right? If you were a civilian, if you were a citizen but not a media professional, you could not broadcast a message, no matter how hard you tried.
Somebody has to make a decision for you about what's worth reading and how it connects to something else. And those navigation systems get built into our institutions by experts who are very good at what they do, but they can never know exactly what it is that you want or what you're interested in.
There are always going to have to be expert filters. I mean, what happens at the moment is somebody writes a book, an agent or a publisher look at the book, they think if it's worthwhile, they're prepared to take a punt on it, they publish it, and they hope that they'll be able to recover their costs, even make a profit. And that filter means that quite a lot of what gets through onto the bookshelves in a bookshop is of a reasonable standard.
Where we've been able to manage and control our information by passing it through expert filters, that information has been quite reliable, generally quite reliable, if somewhat narrow and perspectival and all the rest of it. When people are out on the internet, the markers of good information are much harder to find, and much less, it's much harder to teach people exactly what those markers are, because we are out exploring everything we can.
Some people argue that the paper book will never vanish for the same reason as was made plain by that character, that body that was found stuck in a glacier up in the Alps and had been there for 10,000 years, you may remember. And that body had around its neck a handbag. And a handbag is a very simple, extremely useful device, which is why it's lasted for 10,000 years. And maybe the book, which has been around for about 500 years, will continue to last because it's very portable, it's very enjoyable, it smells nice when it's new, and people may still want to have those things in their houses because books do furnish a room.
Now we know that in the hard copy world, the majority of readers of the Times are in the UK. So the newspaper is written from that perspective. But in the virtual space, the majority of readers are expats. And they don't have the same sort of understanding. They're not living in the UK. Therefore, the paper needs to change.
The newspaper industry in particular has already begun to suffer from the impact of digitization. We've seen revenues, advertising drop, sales drop. We've seen all the major newspapers in the Western world thinking about having an online-only presence and trying to work out how they're going to afford to survive if they do that. On the other hand, the portability, the convenience, and the fact that you can have 1,000 books on one tiny little handheld device means that that will probably become the preferred vehicle in future. So it looks as though that's going to come on stream. Books may remain for collectors and they'll become very expensive items, and older people will prefer them to the reading on screen devices. But it's inevitable that the digital revolution will result in a great change in the way that words are transmitted to readers.
Today, information seeking is central to everything in our lives, and unless we can information seek well, we're in real trouble. Now, in today's universe, everybody has the British Library on their doorstep, in their mobile phone, on their laptop, in their office, and suddenly we have unbelievable resources.
The strength is that it lets us do this thing that we've always done to one degree or another, but now do it on a much larger scale, which is to think together, which is what conversation is usually about. Well, now we can do it with a much broader range of people across a much more diverse territory and a much larger geography.
Every single day that we do something digital, we are potentially leaving a trace out there, and that if somebody wanted to find out where we were shopping, what we were doing, who we were communicating with, why we were doing it, what websites we were logging onto, they could do it. It's a very, very exposed set of media, these electronic communication devices that we now use. What it would be like if your neighbours knew details of your bank account or your medical record, or could listen into your quarrels with your spouse. You would be very disconcerted, because you would feel that you were losing control over areas of your life that just belong to you. We're exposing ourselves, we're stripping ourselves naked to the view of anybody who is interested to find out what we're doing. And in all these ways, therefore, we expose ourselves to view through the use of these devices. Not that we would want to give up using these devices, they're just so useful to us, but they do expose us to scrutiny. One of the great sort of downsides of the internet is the sheer amount of rubbish on it, the sheer amount of misinformation, sheer amount of nonsense.
Well, the web is like everybody lives in London, right? The web is like everybody has access to this enormous pool of people, inexhaustibly large and diverse pool of people. And as a result, on Facebook, on Twitter, on MySpace, on Bebo, et cetera, people have the experience of having thousands of friends. So it's evident to everybody that the web has been this incredible amplifier of weak ties, right? We have many, many more connections. People we knew, from high school or from college that we haven't seen in years, but somehow we're linked to in this way. What we don't know is what that's doing to strong ties. And there has been early research to suggest, in a way kind of alarmingly, that there really is a trade-off. That you can't just amplify the number of weak ties without decreasing either the number or the depth of strong ties you have. And if that's true, that's a big change.
It's very important for people to understand that the internet, with its absence of a center, with its obsession with the edge, is not coincidental. It reflects values. And technology can never be detached from values. Technology reflects human beings. Human beings don't reflect technology.
So, regardless of whether you think, social technology and the internet is good or bad, it is. This is what, the genie is out of the bottle. And I think that's an amazing thing. The social web can do more good in the world than it can do bad. And it's the choice of people and the people who are using it as to what they want to do with it. It is the most empowering generational shift that has ever happened.
Things are free and things are devalued now. I can't get paid to write because there's so much writing out there. But this is a temporary stage. This is not a function of technology, but a function of economics. The crash that we're going through now, this upset in central banking, is largely a result of the ability of people all throughout the periphery to create value without capital.
Most human activity is done to cement social bonds of various sorts. Now, these social bonds turn out to be more important to us than money. So the difference, this has always been true from time immemorial. The difference about the internet, this is now being done on a global level. So, when I tweet for free, I am exchanging information for the sake of reputational credits. People will follow my tweets, I'll get more followers. I may be able to then use that celebrity of some sort to achieve my own ends, whatever they may be. So
Bottom-up creation of a linked world that is abundant beyond imagining. We've never had anything like that before.
Now with the internet, people have access to create and distribute on their own. People can share their own thoughts and feelings, experiences, talents, which I think is a great thing. Ultimately, again, kind of comparing where we were in the past with where we are today and moving into the future, they lose sight of the fact that we have, a factor of 100,000 times more people actually creating quality content than we ever had in the past. And what I think it does, when you see the personal side of people just capturing everyday life, is that it breaks down cultural barriers. In the past, I think people have just kind of consumed their knowledge, or I guess their perception of the world, just through media, which again isn't always unbiased. But when you start seeing everyday life from everyday people on the streets, no matter what country they live in, I think it adds a very personal element to that people can connect with, and they start understanding that they have families, they have feelings, they have dreams, just like I do, and not hearing just the biased stories that they would tune in and see on the news. So in that way, I think that's really what has surprised me throughout this process.
People trying to find new, interesting ways to communicate, become more efficient, become more engaged, become more informed. And I think it leads ultimately to having more empathy, to understanding more about what other people are, what's happening with other people, and sort of putting yourself in their shoes more often, because you're engaging with them.
It's about sharing details that you wouldn't necessarily share, but that give you insight to people, whether you know them or not. It's not just meeting new people, it's staying in touch in a very lightweight way that just isn't practical. It's not practical to pick up the phone and call all of your friends that are across the country every day, but you can hear from them on Twitter every day, and it provides a real connection that you otherwise wouldn't have.
And so when I look at whether social technologies and the social web is a good thing or a bad thing, if it's horrible for society or wonderful for society, I think the reality is that it's here. It's not going away. And so it's up to people who use it to decide whether it is going to represent the best of human nature or the worst of human nature. And realistically, it's probably going to be a little bit of both. So as people are actually learning how to use social technologies, they are using them in all sorts of ways. So of course, social technology is going to have a massive impact in terms of how people organize politically, what they do economically, and how they express themselves as being unique individuals in a social way.
The scale of the activity, the depth of the activity is just mind-blowing, really. I mean, it's just, for a researcher like myself, it's like finding a massive, massive gold mine. And it's just wonderful, wonderful data that hopefully will change society, that will make sure that in the information-rich world we are in, that people will fully benefit from this fantastic resource. So it's just a wonderful, wonderful sort of harvest. And that's a good way of describing it. And it's happening as I'm sitting here now. More and more people are leaving their footprints, their fingerprints for us to analyze, because things change. And that's the other beauty. We can watch change happen almost in real time.
What makes people so special, which is the fact that we're innovators and we are people who can change the world. So we now have tools. I mean, 25 years ago, we didn't have a way to impact the world in one single instant. Today we do, and it's through the internet.